Sometimes the greatest gift life gives you, it's what you would never choose to receive. It's curious how Christmas, this time that everyone describes as magical, usually hides the darkest stories that no one has the courage to tell. Stories that begin with lights flashing in the windows and end with truths that could knock down any unprepared heart. And strange as it may seem, some of these truths come as a blow, not to destroy you, but to awaken you. Because there is a type of pain that does not appear in the body. She appears in silence, between the lines, in the small details that you only see when you're about to lose everything. And that's exactly how this story began, with signs so delicate that any distracted person would call it a coincidence. But coincidences are not repeated. Warnings, yes. You'll realize, as you dive into this narrative, that nothing here happened by chance. That every gesture, every date, every word said, or avoided, was aligned with something bigger, something hidden. And when the truth finally emerged, it didn't come as an explanation, but as a liberation. And maybe you'll discover an important thing along the way, that the real power is not in what is taken from you, but in the strength you find when everything seems to have been ripped away. Then take a deep breath. Squeeze your heart firmly, and get ready to walk through a story where love and betrayal intersect, where Christmas is no longer just a holiday, and it becomes the day a woman discovered her own strength. Now that you're here, come in. This movie has already started, and you won't be able to stop in the middle. On that frigid December morning, when the streets of Boston were still covered in the damp glow of freshly fallen snow, there was something in the air that looked different, as if every lamp hanging from the porches vibrated with a quiet intent. The protagonist walked down the main street watching the Christmas decorations reflect in the windows of the houses, and it was impossible not to feel that contrast between the beauty of the city and the invisible weight that was already pressing on her chest. The cold wind passed too fast, touching her skin as if to warn something, but she, busy with the bags and thoughts, ignored the warning that the universe itself tried to deliver. The narration echoed like the voice of someone older and wiser, commenting that, behind any season of joy, there is always a shadow that waits for the right moment to reveal itself. And although she still thought she was just entering another ordinary December, the truth is that this would be the December that would mark her life forever. Every step she took on that lighted sidewalk carried a destiny she still didn't understand. But something inside her, deep inside, seemed uneasy, as if she was trying to remember an important detail. A detail that would change everything. And, without knowing it, she was moving forward to Christmas that would divide her story into before and after. And, as always happens in the great moments of life, it all started silently, discreetly, almost invisibly. The cold became more intense as she approached the door of the house, where a large and impeccably assembled garland conveyed the false feeling that peace, unity, and warmth reigned inside. But his heart said something else. The narration, in a mentor tone, explained that the best decorated houses sometimes hide the biggest cracks, those that no one sees, but that spread across the emotional carpet of a family until they consume everything. As she pushed the door, she was greeted by the familiar smell of pine and cinnamon, mixed with the sound of a Christmas playlist playing softly in the living room. It was an environment that anyone would consider perfect, but to her, it sounded like a cruel reminder that joy is not improvised when love is already dying. She took off her coat slowly, as if trying to delay the encounter with a truth she is not yet ready to face. And before she even hung it on the hanger, a phrase popped into her mind, a phrase she wouldn't understand until much later. I just didn't know that Christmas I was going to find out who really slept next to me. At that moment, she thought it was just a loose thought. But loose thoughts have a strange habit of predicting storms. The room was beautifully lit, with a tall pine tree decorated in shades of gold, reflecting each lamp like small sparks of hope. But hope was the least there was. She walked to the window, watching the children play outside, making snowmen, laughing out loud, completely oblivious to the adult tragedies unfolding behind closed windows. Meanwhile, the narration explained that, often, the biggest conflicts start weeks, months, even years before the day they finally explode. And looking out the window, she tried to convince herself that all of this, the marriage, the home, the routine, still had salvation. It was like trying to hold snow with your hands. It always ends up melting. The Christmas atmosphere around her seemed to mock her attempt at normalcy. She took a deep breath, almost as if begging for unseen forces to continue. And deep in his chest, he felt a small vibration of alertness, a kind of silent intuition that whispered that something was about to break. But she brushed that thought away, believing they were just reflections of end-of-year stress. She didn't know it was life trying to warn her for the last time. He sat on the sofa and ran his hand gently over the ornaments that decorated the coffee table, as if he wanted to extract calm from something inanimate. The narration highlighted an important truth. Human beings, when they sense danger, try to find comfort in small routines, even when they already know that they are not enough to avoid the inevitable outcome. She watched the clock on the wall, realizing that her husband would soon arrive, and tried to mentally anticipate what the night would be like. But something bothered me. His behavior in the last few days had carried a distant, calculated tone, almost too cold for the time of year. It was as if he was waiting for a specific moment to do something. She just didn't imagine what. His mind wandered between good memories and recent distances, trying to create coherence where there was none. It was like putting together a puzzle with pieces that no longer fit. And that small, almost imperceptible discomfort was already the first crack of the earthquake. About to happen. She just didn't know how to interpret. Not yet. A noise coming from the street caught his attention. Quick footsteps, muffled voices, the sound of cars passing over the accumulated snow. It all seemed ordinary, but anyone who observes their own life with enough attention realizes that, in the days leading up to major revelations, even the sound of the wind seems to carry a hidden message. The narration commented that, before the big turns, there is always a kind of emotional pre-announcement, something that the body feels before the mind understands. And she was trapped in exactly this feeling. The body warned, but the mind refused to believe it. She got up to turn on a few more lights in the room, creating an even cozier atmosphere, perhaps trying to compensate for the emptiness inside with external glow. As she adjusted one of the electronic candles, she felt a slight shiver run down her spine, as if the air was heavier for a second. But he ignored it, as always. After all, who wants to believe that something terrible is about to happen precisely at the most beautiful time of the year? Nobody. And she even less. The phone rang. A short, dry, almost urgent touch. She walked up to him with slow steps, as if her own body was trying to delay the inevitable. The narration explained that, in the great dramas of life, it is not only the words that matter, but the moment in which they arrive. And that ringtone of the phone carried the kind of energy that changes destinies. When he answered, he heard only a formal, distant voice, informing him that the documents were ready. Documents? Which documents? The message was too vague to understand, but too direct to ignore. She answered politely, hung up and stood for long seconds staring at the device, as if waiting for it to explain better. He did not explain, and it was there, at that moment, that a small seed of restlessness settled in her chest, although she was still far from imagining where it would stop. Then I would go back to that moment and say, I should have noticed. But he didn't notice, and the emotional clock kept ticking toward disaster. She tried to resume normality, but normality is not something that is forced when the heart is already at war. A hot tea was poured in, watching the steam rise from the cup as if it were a visual metaphor of what was happening inside. Something boiling, wanting to escape, but still trapped. The narration commented that, many times, the first signs that something is wrong appear in silly details. A silence that is too long, a question avoided, a hurried look. And she had lived exactly that in recent weeks. But, as so many do when they wish to preserve the illusion of what they have built, they chose not to see. She sat down at the table, held the cup tightly, and wondered if she was just too tired. It was easier to believe in fatigue than to face the stark reality that something sinister was about to happen. But reality, even ignored, does not cease to exist. And she was about to collide with her head-on. The house seemed to breathe along with her, sometimes silent, sometimes making small crackles in the wood, as if trying to warn that the balance was about to collapse. Outside, night was beginning to fall, and the Christmas lights created a glow that contrasted almost cruelly with the instability that grew inside her. The narration explained that, before any major rupture, there is always a moment when the universe holds its breath, as if everything were paused before the fall. And it was exactly this feeling that took over the room at that moment. She didn't know that, days before the divorce filing that would devastate her world, she was already walking the edges of a story she didn't choose. But it was. And as she watched the lights flickering on the Christmas tree, she could hardly imagine that this would be the last Christmas with her husband. At least the husband she thought she knew. The real one was about to reveal itself, and the signs would start to appear long before the chaos erupted. Her wedding, from the outside, seemed as stable as the old wooden houses that sprawled through Portland's quiet streets, with their white facades and windows adorned with pine wreaths. But anyone who looked closely knew that the painting was starting to chip in places no one else noticed. In recent months, the routine that was once predictable and even comforting began to carry a strange weight, a sense of distance that could not be explained with work, stress, or common tiredness. There were mornings when he barely looked into her eyes, nights when the touch seemed mechanical, conversations that ended too quickly, as if he was in a hurry to escape something he never said. The narration, in the voice of a mentor, reminded us that relationships rarely fall apart all at once. They slowly fall apart, starting with the details that both pretend not to see to maintain the illusion of everything is fine. And she, because she loved it too much, ignored the small warnings. The cell phone always facing down, the late answers, the calculated way of justifying absences too brief to be suspicious, but long enough to leave doubts hanging in the air. Still, she tried to save everything, creating more welcoming dinners, sending affectionate messages, insisting on conversations that never deepened anything. It was like trying to relight an extinguished candle with a damp match. The intention existed, but the flame was no longer sustainable. And as Christmas approached with its promise of unity, they experienced just the opposite, a quiet, almost elegant, but utterly destructive detachment. At work, he always seemed too present, as if he had found perfect excuses to disappear for hours that were once full of conviviality. She noticed it when she made coffee by herself, when he came in late explaining meetings that had never existed before, when she turned off the computer too quickly as soon as the main door opened at night. The narration highlighted something that few admit. Intuition is always the first to perceive the end, even when the mouth still insists on saying, "It will be fine." And her intuition screamed, even though she tried to silence her with logical reasons and mild justifications. Sometimes she found herself wondering if the problem was herself, trying to adjust her behavior as someone who moves furniture around thinking that the reorganization will improve the emotional climate. But it was no use. It was like tidying up the room while the roof was already falling in. The little signs were everywhere, and she realized for the first time that his smile was no longer for her, but for some idea that resided only in his head, an idea she didn't know. And even so, he continued to believe that maybe it was just a bad phase, because no one wants to accept that what he built with so much care can end on the eve of a Christmas. The days became quieter, as if the whole house had agreed not to make noise so as not to draw attention to what was wrong. Conversations have become predictable, made up of automatic phrases, such as, "Was everything okay at work?" or "Have you had dinner?" Impeccable dialogues on the surface, but hollow as empty boxes. The narration explained that a relationship never breaks with a scream. It breaks with silence. And she lived this silence every day, feeling her soul knocking on the door of understanding and not being answered. The hugs diminished and, when they happened, they no longer brought that warmth that once seemed enough to warm the entire winter. It was strange to realize that the person she shared a bed with was the same one she now avoided even touching her arm at night. And as Christmas approached, the streets became more colorful, while her life grew grayer. It was a painful contrast, a daily reminder that the outside of the world does not adapt to our inner ruins. And she already felt that there was an invisible crack growing under her feet, even though she was still trying to convince herself that she could glue it on in time. Even as he tried to regain closeness, everything he did felt wrong or out of timing, as if he had learned to emotionally dodge with calculated precision. She bought tickets to a Christmas concert he always loved, but he canceled it saying he was exhausted. He tried to prepare his favorite dish, but he arrived too late for dinner. He planned a special night, but he said he needed to get up early. Small rejections that, together, formed a wall between them. The narration, with a calm and wise tone, explained that when someone really wants to stay, they find a way. And when he wants to leave, he finds an excuse. But she didn't want to believe it. I spent hours reviewing old conversations on my cell phone, trying to find where exactly the wire started to break. It was an attempt to understand the incomprehensible, to give logic to something that, in fact, had already been decided away from her. And even so, he continued to bet on reconstruction, because the heart, when it loves, always believes that there is still enough brick to rebuild cracked walls. Little did she know that what was coming was not a cave-in, but an emotional earthquake. Weekends, once filled with outings, cafes, and little traditions, now felt like an emotional minefield. Any attempt to approach him resulted in irritation from him, as if she was asking too much just because she wanted presents. He took refuge in his cell phone, on the computer, or invented external tasks, always running away from what was once natural, simply being. The narration explained that love does not suddenly disappear, but its expression changes when loyalty begins to slip. And she could see it in the details. He had stopped asking how her day went. He no longer commented on her work. He no longer made future plans. He just planned as if he were alone. Sunday afternoons, which were once filled with laughter and the smell of hot chocolate, have become long hours of uncomfortable silence. And each time she tried to strike up a deeper conversation, he responded with clipped sentences, looking away. It was like living next to a stranger who wore the same familiar face. And as Christmas drew nearer, she felt that she carried all the emotional effort alone, as if dragging a heavy sleigh down a road he had missed beside her. On some days, she even wondered if she wasn't exaggerating, trying to convince herself that adult life is just like that, full of ups and downs. But deep down, I knew that it was not just that. It was different. It was targeted. It was calculated. The narration highlighted that when someone is hiding something, the body denounces it before the mouth. The gaze avoids, the gesture hesitates, the touch does not happen. And he was living proof of that. Each time she got close, he retreated in a subtle way, almost imperceptible, but painful enough to be felt by those he still loved. She tried to rationalize, telling herself that maybe it was stress, maybe it was work, maybe it was just a phase. But levels don't leave such deep marks, nor do they create walls so high. And one particular night, as he folded freshly washed clothes, he noticed that his perfume on the pillow was fading. Not because he changed the pillowcase, but because he hardly slept there anymore. And this small detail, so simple, was like a silent warning that his heart was already elsewhere, even if she didn't know where yet. Still, she tried. I tried to talk, I tried to ask them out, I tried to create moments that would bring back the lightness they had lost. But he always seemed busy with something she couldn't access. It was as if he had created a new version of himself for someone she didn't know. The narration explained that when the truth is about to come out, life begins to create noises that become impossible to ignore. And she began to notice these noises in everything. In the way he hid his cell phone, in the way he smiled at messages he didn't show, in the way he avoided including his name in any conversation about the future. She noticed, but didn't want to accept it. Because accepting meant admitting that something much more serious was going on. And admitting it meant facing a fear she wasn't ready to face. And like anyone who wants to preserve their peace, she chose to wait. A wait full of anxiety, but still wait. As the days passed and the Christmas lights filled the town with brightness, the darkness inside their home seemed to increase. It was as if two realities coexisted, the external, vibrant and joyful, and the internal one, sterile and silent. The narration, with a deep tone, explained that some relationships do not end with scandals. They end with indifference. And indifference is always the last breath before the definitive break. She already felt invisible, as if she had been pushed out of her own life while someone took her place without asking permission. And yet, he was still there, trying to hold on to a thread that he had already dropped. The most painful thing was to realize that his coldness was not accidental. It was constant. And constancy, when it doesn't come from love, comes from an intention that hasn't been said yet. And that intention was about to be revealed, in the cruelest way possible. In the last stretch of this period, days before the big turn, she began to question whether she really knew the man she married. It was a doubt that came as a light but insistent shadow, haunting his thoughts in the early mornings when he said he was working. The narration reflected that when fate is about to turn an important corner, the soul feels it before the body. And her soul already felt a strange weight, as if a revelation was about to happen. Something big, something that would change everything, something that would take away the ground she was still trying to hold. And as she tried to convince herself that there was still hope, a silent phrase echoed inside her, like a soft premonition. If he's different, it's because something has already changed. She didn't know it, but she was about to discover that this something had a name, a number of documents, dates, intentions, and it had started long before Christmas. Chaos was already being prepared, even though she had not yet seen the first pieces of the plan. The memory of her mother always appeared to her as a soft sunset in the hills of Vermont, with that orange mixed with the cold blue that made her heart tighten and warm at the same time. And in the last few months this memory seemed even more alive, as if her presence was prowling every corner of the house even after so many years since her departure. On a quiet afternoon, while sorting through old boxes in the attic, she found a photo of her mother smiling next to a modest Christmas tree. A worn photo that smelled of longing and meant more than any expensive gift she had ever received in her life. The narration explained that some people leave invisible inheritances long before the visible, and his mother had left just such a mark. Values, strength, sweetness, and a silent faith that always held her hands in difficult times. When she received the call officially confirming the inheritance, she felt a mixture that is impossible to describe. Joy, longing, fear, gratitude, and an emptiness that only appears when we receive something that we did not want to receive in this way. It was like receiving a gift wrapped in tears. And she believed for a few minutes that this would be a positive turn in her life, a moment of reconstruction. Little did he know that it would be the beginning of the collapse. She clearly remembered the moment of the call. She was in the kitchen making tea while watching snowflakes fall in the yard, and the phone vibrated with a number she didn't recognize. When she answered, she heard the typical formality of lawyers, harsh and technical words that contrasted with the softness of her mother's memory. The narration explained that important news never chooses the ideal time to arrive. It simply arrives, like winter, without asking permission. And as the woman on the other end of the line explained details about the inheritance, values, papers, documents, deadlines, and legal instructions, she tried to take a deep breath to take it all in, but her heart was stuck in the past, hearing her mother's voice say that she would always take care of her, one way or another. After she hung up, she stood for several minutes, holding her cell phone as if he was still talking. It was at that moment that her husband entered the kitchen, and his reaction was not what she expected. There was no hug, no emotional surprise, no concern. There was silence. It's a look that's too long, too careful, too calculated. That look planted the first seed of discomfort that would later grow like a dark tree in the middle of marriage. In the following days, while she was trying to digest the news and organize the inheritance procedures, she noticed something strange. He asked too many questions. Too specific questions. Questions that ranged from the value to the deadline, from the transfer to the lawyer, from the conditions to the final document. The narration, in a mentor's tone, explained that when someone is more interested in what you have received than in what you are feeling, they are not looking at you, they are looking at the object behind you. And that's exactly what she began to realize. He was helpful, but helpfulness has a different glow when it comes from the heart. His had a metallic sheen, almost cold, as if evaluating an investment. She ignored it, trying to believe that it was just natural curiosity. After all, he didn't want to create conflicts where he didn't need to. But the heart feels before the mind admits it. And hers already felt that there was something out of place in that sudden interest. One night, while reviewing an envelope with documents, he entered the room and sat next to her on the bed with a look he hadn't seen in months. But it wasn't affection. It was strategic attention. He asked again for details about the inheritance, questions she had already answered, questions that made it clear that he memorized everything accurately. The narration highlighted that some silences reveal more than words, and his silence after the answers was one of those. He didn't say, "I'm sorry for your mom," he didn't say, "She'd be proud," he didn't say, "Let's get through this together." He just said, "I see." But what he was getting wasn't what she imagined. It was another calculation, another intention, another plan. And for the first time since the call, she felt a slight shiver on the back of her head, as if a cold wind had blown through the closed window. That feeling wasn't about grief. It was about danger. Still, she tried to cling to the emotional side of the situation, remembering the recipes she made with her mother, the mornings when the two of them went for walks in the yellow-leaved park in the fall, the old letters her mother wrote with advice so wise that it seemed to predict the future. And as she relived those memories, her heart filled with a mixture of strength and vulnerability. The narration explained that true inheritances are not lists of numbers, but lists of feelings that shape who we are. And she knew that her mother would never have left that financial gift with the intention of causing pain. On the contrary, she wanted to ensure that her daughter had security and freedom. But ironically, security and freedom would be the two things her husband would try to wrest from her. And perhaps the mother had foreseen something, because among the pieces of the envelope was a simple letter, written years earlier, that said, "Take care. Not everyone who hugs you wants to warm you up." She read that sentence 3 times, and only much later would she understand the warning. As the days passed, his behavior became more evident, but not evident to the point of being obvious. It was subtle. He spent more time around her, but not out of love. It was surveillance. He offered to help with documents, but not out of care. It was investigation. He asked if he had already received everything, but not out of interest. It was anticipation. The narration commented that human intentions are like trails in the snow. At first they seem disordered, but when you look from above, you notice the pattern. And his pattern was already beginning to form. With each question, each silence, each disguised observation, he blurted out small fragments of what he really wanted. And, without realizing it, she began to put each one of them away as pieces of a puzzle that she didn't want to put together. Because part of her already knew she wouldn't like the final image. On a particularly cold late afternoon, when the sky seemed painted gray and lilac, she received another document from the lawyer and left the envelope on the living room table. He got up to answer a call and, when he returned, he found the envelope slightly out of place. Small detail. Too small for someone inattentive. Gigantic for someone who already smelled danger. The narration explained that when we are emotionally attached to something, we notice millimetric changes that no one else sees. She noticed. But again, he silenced the discomfort. After all, she didn't want to believe that her own husband would touch something so personal, so intimate, so connected to his mother's memory. But he moved. And it wouldn't be the last time. In the days leading up to the collapse, she began to realize that he didn't just ask about numbers. He asked about dates, specific dates, which coincided with meetings of his that she never understood. He asked about deadlines, deadlines that seemed synchronized with a parallel schedule. He asked about subscriptions, subscriptions he clearly should never have access to. The narration explained that when a person is architecting something, the pattern appears not in what he says, but in when he says it. And everything he asked always came at the right time, too precise, too convenient, as if waiting for key information to trigger something. And this would later become too clear to deny. He was not only interested in the inheritance, he was preparing to act at the very moment when she officially received everything. And it was in this strange, tense, silent atmosphere that she began to notice something even more disturbing. He seemed to know certain things before her. He knew when the lawyer would send messages. He knew when documents would arrive. He knew how long she would have to sign the final papers. The narration highlighted that there are coincidences, and there are signs, and that was no coincidence. It was a warning. Notice that he was already involved in something she still didn't understand. Notice that he already had information that he could not have. Notice that someone, somewhere, was feeding a plan that didn't include her good. And when she realized this, she felt a deep anguish, a tightness in her stomach that made her hold the table tightly, as if the house had tilted for a second. Something was wrong. Very wrong. But she still didn't know the size of the storm that was about to fall on her life. And it was in this state of silent confusion, trying to balance grief, responsibility, and strangeness, that the emotional loop began to form within her. She tried to focus on her mother's memory, on the good memories, on the teachings she would carry forever. But every time she looked at her husband, she felt that there was something hidden behind that familiar face, like a shadow that moves behind a curtain. The narration explained that when a truth is about to emerge, the heart begins to race before the mind even understands why. And hers was already beating as if anticipating something devastating. The inheritance, which was supposed to be a gesture of love, was becoming the fuse of a plan she hadn't imagined, a plan that would change her life on the very day he would file for divorce. And this revelation would only begin to take shape the day everything collapsed for good. On the exact morning it all came crashing down. The city looked like it had been hand-painted by someone who loved to exaggerate the winter glow, because the streets were so white and silent that they reminded one of those Christmas cards people send when they want to look happier than they really are. She woke up with a strange feeling in her chest. It wasn't sadness or anxiety. It was something she couldn't name, as if her soul was trying to warn her that an entire chapter was about to change. The clock struck 7:12 a.m. when she came downstairs to find the room lit only by the soft light of the pine tree, which flickered with such a slow pace that it seemed to breathe along with the house. While preparing coffee, he realized that his every movement seemed to be millimetrically observed by a silence that was not common, a silence that weighs, that warns, that denounces. The narration said that some mornings are born carrying a decision that is not ours, and that was one of them. She just didn't know that, at that same time, her husband had already been awake for a long time, awake and decided. And this detail would change the course of everything before she even finished the first sip of coffee. When he came down the stairs, there was something different in the way he walked, in the way he looked away, in the way he breathed. It seemed rehearsed. And ironically, rehearsal was exactly what he had done for the past few days, though she still wasn't able to see it. He approached the kitchen with a cold expression that had been built for months, but which now seemed ready, finished, perfect for the moment he had chosen. The narration noted that when someone plans a breakup, the body speaks before the mouth, and its body was already screaming. He didn't kiss her, he didn't ask if he slept well, he didn't comment on the decor she had adjusted the night before. He just went in, opened the closet with dry movements, and took a mug as if fulfilling a task. She tried to strike up a conversation, but received answers so short that they seemed to be measured with a ruler. It was then that he realized that something was too serious to be just a bad morning mood. There was a shadow in his eyes, a lack of warmth so intense that it could freeze even the burning fireplace. And as she tried to decipher his behavior, the clock seemed to speed up, as if racing to reach the exact moment when he would reveal the reason for such coldness. Throughout the morning, he avoided eye contact so obviously that even the house noticed. She watched his movements in the room, picking up the phone, sending quick messages, looking out the window, walking back and forth like someone waiting for a specific time. The narration explained that great revelations rarely come by total surprise. They leave traces, they leave signs, they leave a smell in the air, like rain about to fall. And that morning smelled exactly like that. When she asked if everything was okay, he answered yes in such an artificial way that the yes seemed like a disguised no. And when she tried to insist, he quickly changed the subject, as if evading a question that can reveal what he does not want to admit. The tension grew inside the house like a balloon about to burst. She felt something wrong, but she didn't know what. The only thing he knew was that this was no ordinary morning. It was a chosen day. Chosen by him. Chosen with precision. Chosen to hurt. Shortly after noon, he asked them to talk. It was not a soft request. It was a call. His voice had a hard, objective, almost professional tone, as if he were about to deal with business, not life as a couple. The narration explained that when someone's voice loses affection, the affection is long gone. And at that moment, sitting on the couch, she realized that something terrible was about to be said, but she had no idea how big the impact was. He stood up, as if he didn't want to share the same level of floor with her, and said he needed to be honest. Honesty never sounds as cold as it is true. Then she took a deep breath, expecting anything but what came next. He took an envelope from the table, an envelope she had never seen. And with a look that mixed tension and relief, he finally said the words that froze time. "I'm asking for a divorce." And after that, the world no longer made sense. The feeling that came over her wasn't just shock. It was as if the floor had disappeared. The room, the lights, the pine tree, the smell of cinnamon, everything was distant, as if she were watching her own life from the outside. The narration said that there are phrases that have no return, phrases that open doors that never close, phrases that change the course of an entire life. And that was one of them. She was unable to respond immediately. She was paralyzed. Her heart raced as if trying to keep up with the rhythm of the tragedy that was falling upon her. The mind tried to understand, to grasp, to rationalize, but it was impossible. There was no fight, there was no recent argument, there were no apparent motives. It was like being hit by a giant wave without even having seen the sea move. And before he could ask anything, he kept talking, without emotion, without hesitation, without humanity, like someone who rehearsed every word in front of the mirror. Because, deep down, he had rehearsed. He delivered justifications so organized that they seemed copied from somewhere. "It's not working, we're different, I need space. I don't want to prolong something that's already over." They were ready-made, dry, cutting phrases, used as a shield to hide the true reason that he would not yet reveal. The narration explained that when someone lies about the reason, the lie is always too perfect. And that perfection hurt more than the words themselves. She tried to ask why, tried to ask for an explanation, tried to understand, but he dodged, circumvented, avoided. It was like talking to a carefully constructed wall to not let anything pass. And deep down, the breakdown was not just the marriage, it was reality. Because none of it made sense in the context of the last few days, until it would make too much sense in the following days. When she finally managed to take a deep breath and ask if there was someone else, he denied it too quickly, with a rehearsed-sounding assurance. He said no, that it wasn't that he just wanted to move on. But the eyes did not follow the voice, and neither did his soul. The narration commented that when the truth is too great to be hidden, it escapes through the details. And she already realized that something was being omitted. The divorce was not spontaneous. It wasn't emotional. It was not a decision of the heart. It was logistics. And logistical decisions have deadlines. She felt it. He felt it in his body. He felt it in the silence between the words. She felt it in the coldness with which he put the envelope away after announcing it. And in that instant, even though she was still devastated, something inside her began to awaken, a sense of alertness. He ended the conversation so abruptly that it seemed like he was ending a work meeting, not ending a marriage. He said he would go out for a few hours, that he needed to think. But the narration clarified that this type of withdrawal is not reflection. It is execution. He left, letting the door slam hard enough to make the house shake. And it was in this beat that she felt that the world, as she knew it, had ended. She sat for several minutes, unable to move a single part of her body. The shock was so deep that it felt physical. Her breathing fluctuated. His hands trembled. His heart was heavy. And in the midst of this internal chaos, something began to form. A question. A simple but devastating question. Why today? When he finally managed to get up, he walked through the house as if he were crossing a snowfield after a storm, every heavy step, every confused thought. The narration said that pain always comes first, but soon gives way to curiosity, and from curiosity is born investigation. And that's exactly what happened inside her. As she looked at the envelope he left on the table, something pulsed. Inside her chest, something that wasn't just sadness, it was suspicion. Why that day? Why that particular time? Why the coldness so calculated? She didn't know it yet, but that was the key day of his whole plan. And the first questions that arose at that moment would be the gateway to the darkest discoveries of his life. Chaos had begun, and the first answers would soon appear. When the door closed behind him, the whole house seemed to let out a heavy sigh, one of those that announce that something has been torn out of place. She stood there, standing in the room lit by the slow flickering of the Christmas lights, trying to understand what had happened, but it all sounded like a distant echo, as if the scene had been torn from a movie she didn't remember agreeing to participate in. Her mind began to race before she could even take a deep breath. Why today? Was the first question, the one that throbbed in the chest like a bell rung too soon. Was it any other day? No. It was the exact day of an important inheritance document. The narration explained that when two dates collide with such precision, it is rarely a coincidence. And that unexpected divorce seemed anything but a coincidence. She tried to calm her thoughts, but they came back with force, like angry waves crashing against an already fractured rock. She walked over to the couch and sat down slowly, holding the envelope he had left on the table. The object seemed heavier than it should have been, as if it carried, in addition to the paper, a piece of the truth that she did not yet have access to. The narration said that when life suddenly changes, the first reaction is to look for where the script started to go wrong. And that's exactly what she did. She looked back at the last few weeks in her mind, trying to fit pieces together. His questions about the inheritance, the calculated coldness, the odd schedules, the hidden messages, the distant look. Every detail that once seemed loose now formed a trail that pointed directly to that day. She held the envelope tightly, wondering why he brought it right there, right today, right at that minute. It was impossible not to notice a pattern. And where there is pattern, there is intention. She felt it with uncomfortable, almost physical clarity. Her heart, in the midst of emotional grief, began to awaken an awareness that only arises when something doesn't make sense. And he did nothing. He didn't cry. He didn't hesitate. He didn't show doubt. He seemed ready, too ready, over-prepared, as if he had already rehearsed every gesture of that morning. The narration observed that when someone makes an emotional decision, The body trembles, the voice fails, the hand hesitates. But he didn't hesitate, not for a second. And that, she realized, was the most unsettling part. Where was the emotion? Where was the conflict? Where was humanity? They weren't. They were glaring absences that pointed to a single possibility. This was not an emotional breakup. It was a strategic move. And the more she thought about it, the more questions arose. Questions that burned like sparks of doubt on a floor full of gasoline. She tried to remember every minute of that morning, looking for flaws in his behavior, details that would reveal more than the words spoken. And as she mentally revisited the scene, she noticed that he seemed to look at his watch often, something she hadn't noticed before. Looking at the clock means waiting for something, waiting for an exact moment, waiting for an event aligned with a plan. The narration explained that time, when observed in this way, is not chronology, it is calculation. And he was calculating the right time, calculating the ad, calculating the impact. This made the initial question multiply. Why that day? Why at that time? Why with so much rehearsal? And mainly, why just on the day she received the final document of the inheritance? The line between coincidence and purpose was beginning to disappear completely. And her purpose was still unknown. For the time being. She got up and started walking around the house, trying to find answers in the room, as if the walls could testify to what she didn't yet know. The kitchen looked the same, but the air was different. The room was lit, but the glow seemed cold. The house, which had always told love stories, now seemed to carry secrets. The narration said that when a relationship hides something, the house feels it first. And her house seemed to feel for months. She approached the furniture where he left the car key and realized that the position was different, shifted a few centimeters. Too small for anyone to notice. Too giant for her to ignore in that state of alert. Something in him was always being moved, rearranged, hidden. And when she realized this, her doubt turned into distrust. And mistrust is always the first step of the investigation. Even though she didn't know it yet. The open envelope on the table seemed almost aglow, as if calling out to her in an uncomfortable way. When she picked it up again, she realized that the content wasn't just the divorce petition. There were other papers in there, papers that seemed to have been manipulated before. She ran her fingers over the edges, noticing minimal marks, as if someone else had touched it before handing it over. The narration explained that objects tell stories when observed calmly, and that envelope had the story of another intention. He wasn't just handing over a document. He was delivering a piece of the plan. And this raised another question. How many pieces had she not seen yet? How many others were hidden in drawers, folders, deleted messages, data on the computer? The truth was there, very close, but still inaccessible. It was like looking at a closed door, knowing the key was somewhere, but not knowing where. She took a deep breath, trying not to drown in the whirlwind of thoughts. But the more she tried to calm down, the clearer it became that her decision hadn't been made on an emotional impulse. It was an action aligned with something bigger, something she still didn't understand. The narration, with a mentor's tone, said that when the questions begin to align, the truth is closer than it seems. And her questions now came full circle. Strange behavior, unusual interest in the inheritance, calculated coldness, specific time, documents ready, absence of emotion. Everything pointed to a plan. A plan made before she knew anything. The sensation that took over her body was so strong that she had to lean on the counter. Because the final question, the most devastating, began to form in the mind. Did he know before I did? This possible answer, still abstract, brought such a deep shiver that she had to close her eyes for a few seconds. If he knew something before her, then someone had told her. And if anyone had told, then that wasn't just a coincidence, it was an alliance. Alliance with whom? With what intention? The narration highlighted that when a heart feels betrayed, it seeks not only the cause, but the origin. And the origin of the scenario was hidden somewhere she hadn't yet reached. But it would, because every unanswered question is a trail, and she had just entered the trail of the plan he had been putting together. Without realizing it, she was about to bump into the first major piece of evidence. Something that would arise not because she sought, but because I was about to meet unintentionally. And this discovery would be the door to the revelation of the next chapter, the one where the plan would finally begin to appear. The discovery didn't happen at a dramatic moment, nor accompanied by intense music or screaming revelations. It happened in the quiet calm of the kitchen, as she tried to catch her breath after so many unanswered questions. Sometimes, the truth chooses to come out when the heart is so fragile that it cannot defend itself. She opened a drawer looking for a notepad to jot down thoughts she didn't want to lose, but as she pulled it out, something got stuck. A thin, rigid object, hidden behind the false bottom of the drawer. Curious, she pulled carefully and found a piece of paper folded several times, like something put away in a hurry. The narration explained that truth rarely hides in obvious places. It hides in what no one expects to exist. And there, in the silence of that kitchen decorated for Christmas, she held the first concrete piece of the enigma. His hands trembled before he even opened the paper. She didn't know what was inside, but she knew it was going to be something that would change everything. When he unfolded the paper, he saw that it was a faded print, almost illegible in places, but with enough words to freeze his breath. Confirming the transfer, expected date, completion of the process, AS agreed. There was no clear sender, but the email appeared to have been sent weeks earlier, even before she received any formal notification about the inheritance. The narration, in a firm and compassionate voice, said that when someone knows too much ahead of time, it is because they have never been by your side. They have been above you, observing, calculating, anticipating. She read the words over and over again, as if trying to find some error, some alternative interpretation, something that would justify it. But there was no mistake. He knew. I knew before her. And the fact that he kept it in a false fund only proved the intention. The shock was so deep that she had to lean on the counter to keep from falling. The worst, however, was not the document itself. It was the name that appeared at the end of the email. A name she had never seen. A name that was not part of her life, nor of her circle of friends, nor of his team at work. It was someone completely unknown, someone who clearly had access to information that should be exclusive to her and her lawyer. The narration highlighted that when a name comes out of nowhere, it carries enough secrets to overturn any illusions. And that wasn't just a name. It was a breach, an indication, a trail. She reread that strange last name, trying to identify where it could be from, but nothing came to mind. And that made it all the more frightening. Because if there was a person involved, it was because there was a parallel conversation. A conversation that took place far, far away from her. A conversation that clearly had to do with numbers, deadlines, advantages, and not with feelings, marriage, or respect. She immediately remembered all of her husband's insistent questions about the inheritance. The questions that started before she even knew the details. Questions that seemed like curiosity at the time, but now sounded like tracking. The narration emphasized that the human mind, when awakened, reconstructs history with lightning clarity. Everything fits together, everything is organized, everything reveals what was hidden. And there, in that instant, she saw the entire timeline with new clarity. He didn't just know. He was preparing. He waited. He had been calculating the best time to act. And the best time, he realized, was exactly the day she officially received the inheritance, the same day he filed for divorce. This was no coincidence. It was the central axis of the plan. And realizing this was like taking an invisible punch that ripped the air out of her lungs. With her hands still shaking, she opened a few more drawers, as if the first discovery had activated an instinct she had never felt before, the instinct for truth. And in the second drawer, he found something even more disturbing, a black folder hidden under old manuals. The briefcase was locked, but the clasp was broken, as if it had been forced recently. Inside were copies of documents she had never seen, updates on assets, financial studies, projection tables, notes with dates and numbers that coincided with his meetings in recent weeks. The narration said that when the hidden pieces begin to appear in sequence, it is not by chance. It is the shot screaming to be seen. She flipped through that material, each page more revealing than the last. And then he found something that made his hands go cold. Meeting dates scheduled with the same name as the email. The name unknown. The connection between the two was there, clear, evident, and devastating. Her heart began to beat so fast that it seemed to echo in her ears. The feeling wasn't just shock, it was betrayal in its most naked form. Because it is one thing for someone to give up marriage. Another, completely different, is for someone to plan the end as if it were a business strategy. The narration reinforced that the worst pain is not that of loss. It is that of discovery. The loss you mourn. The discovery you don't forget. She realized that she was not just facing a divorce. He was facing a conspiracy. A conspiracy built calmly, precisely, coldly. And the worst thing was to imagine that all the sleepless nights, all the excuses, all the silences, all the absences had been part of it. Part of a plan he thought she would never figure out. But he found out. Accidentally, yes. But he found out. She took a deep breath, trying to keep the tears from falling on the papers, but it was impossible to hold back the silent revolt that rose up her throat. The narration explained that it is at this exact point in the story that the strongest women awaken, when they realize that they have never been dealing only with emotional pain, but with structured manipulation. And she woke up. He felt within him a fire that was not destructive. It was revealing. A fire that said, "You're going to figure it all out." Questions that were once confusing began to line up in a clear pattern. Why was he so interested in the inheritance? Because it needed the perfect timing. Why did you file for divorce that day? Because it was the only day that benefited the plan. Why did it have a hidden folder? Because he had been planning everything for months. And why did that unknown name appear in everything? Because that person was the key, the essential piece that was missing. With the document in her hand and her heart on fire, she looked into the room as if she were seeing everything for the first time. Every detail of the room felt different. It was no longer the safe home she believed she had. It was the setting where a plan had been built in the shadows. The narration said that when the truth begins to emerge, it drags other truths with it. And the next revelation was to come. Not because she would look for it, but because something, almost like a warning, was about to come naturally in her path, revealing once and for all that what she found there was just the beginning. Because the whole plan was still hidden. And the accidental discovery was just the gateway. The real conspiracy was about to be unraveled, step by step. In the quiet investigation she would begin without even realizing it. From the moment she found that email and that hidden folder, something inside her changed so profoundly that even the way she breathed seemed different. It was as if he had spent years living in a room lit only by dim light bulbs, and suddenly someone turned on all the lights. The narration explained that the truth, when it appears, does not return innocence, it awakens strength. And that's exactly what happened to her that night. He sat down in front of the living room table, organized all the documents and clippings in a silent row, as if analyzing evidence of a real investigation case. And for the first time, he looked at everything with new eyes. Eyes that no longer sought loving explanations, but logical connections. What started as a shock was turning into strategy. Every detail that once hurt now became a clue. And, in the midst of that chaos on paper, she realized that she was no longer lost. I was starting to see a pattern that could only be dismantled if she remained in absolute silence. She knew that confronting immediately would be a mistake. Confrontations feed defenses, and defenses feed lies. The voiceover said that the most effective investigation does not begin with questions. It begins with observation. And that's what she did. He decided not to say anything, not to change anything in a perceptible way, not to alter the routine he believed he controlled. She started to observe the times more carefully, to notice where he looked when he thought she wasn't seeing, to notice the moments when he disappeared for a few minutes to answer calls that didn't exist before. Nothing escaped her radar anymore. Every step, every gesture, every silence of his now had meaning. And the more he watched, the clearer it became that this wasn't just a plan. It was a plan shared with someone. She needed to find out who. It was then that, instead of looking for answers in discussions, she looked in more discreet places. It started with his agenda, not his cell phone, but the physical one, the one he rarely used but always kept in an office drawer. In that diary, she found strange markings, abbreviations that didn't make sense, initials that didn't belong to any friend or colleague she knew. They were codes. Small, discreet, but code. The narration explained that those who plan in the dark rarely leave everything digitized, because the digital leaves traces. They spread signs on pieces of paper, short messages, symbols that only make sense to those who are part of the scheme. And there, on the pages of November and December, there was a pattern. Hastily arranged meetings that always coincided with updates to the inheritance, notes of times synchronized with messages she found deleted from his phone. It was like looking at a map that had previously seemed confusing, but now revealed a clear route. As she examined his cell phone, not directly, but by observing his behavior, she noticed something even more alarming. He never left the device away from him again. I even took him to the bathroom, slept with him face down, silenced notifications as soon as they arrived. The narration said that a cell phone is not just a device. It is the black box of human behavior. And his black box was locked. But even locked up, she noticed patterns. The times of the notifications. The frequency of sudden screen locks. The way he quickly discarded messages as soon as he received them. Everything indicated that there were parallel conversations going on, and not harmless conversations. Conversations that needed to be hidden from someone who lived in the same house. And that only reinforced what she already suspected. Her husband wasn't just distancing himself, he was conspiring. To delve even deeper, she discreetly talked to someone she trusted, her brother, who lived in another city. She didn't tell her everything, just enough for him to guide her on how to identify suspicious financial transactions. He explained that when there is hidden financial interest, the behavior leaves traces even in small actions. Recent searches in the browser, repeated bank queries, files with random names that hide camouflaged spreadsheets. The narration pointed out that, in cases like that, the greatest ally is not anger. It is strategic silence. And that's how she acted. Take it easy. With method. With a precision that I didn't even know I had. She scoured his computer history and found erased but still recoverable traces of research on divorce laws involving large amounts of money and separation terms linked to financial receipts. They were fragments of pages, automatic captures of the system. And when he saw that, he knew. He had planned the perfect timing because he needed the exact day. Nothing was spontaneous. Nothing was emotional. It was all legal. Deliberate, cold. In the following days, she started to set up a mental mural. He remembered the old conversations, the moment when he began to change, the first signs of distance, the questions about inheritance made too soon, the silences suddenly controlled, the blank stare that only appeared when someone hid something too big to fit in the body. The narration explained that the human mind, when pushed to the limit, activates a survival mechanism, transforming pain into lucidity. And that's what she did. Lucidity came like a bolt of lightning through the darkness. She finally understood that none of this had been a consequence of the natural wear and tear of marriage. It was not a crisis. It was not routine. It wasn't tiredness. It was preparation. Preparation to rip it off emotionally, while trying to secure financial advantage at the other end. And the scariest thing was to realize that this was not being done alone. Someone was behind it. The person in the email. The person of the meetings. The person of the hidden messages. To confirm this, she decided to thoroughly investigate the name that appeared in the document. He didn't look for anything on his computer. It would be risky. But he searched on his own cell phone, in private mode, for variations of the name, associated companies, professional profiles, social networks, old news. The narration, in a voice of wisdom, said that the universe always returns answers to those who seek with courage. And she found it. The name belonged to someone linked to special financial consultancies, people who advise on the concealment of assets, protection of assets in separation processes, and early transfers. When he read this, he felt his entire body cool. It wasn't just a discovery. It was absolute confirmation. It wasn't just an emotional plan. It was a legal financial plan, created and organized with specialized help. And at that moment, the part of her that still tried to believe in coincidence died completely. But the turning point came when she found, inside the hidden black folder, a loose sheet of handwritten notes. The lyrics were his. And in the upper corner was something that took the air out of her lungs, a date highlighted by repeated underlining, the date of inheritance. And just below, with smaller but legible letters, ideal day. The narration said that there is no crueler form of betrayal than someone planning their pain. And there it was, written in his own handwriting, the ideal day to destroy the marriage and try to secure access to the inheritance. She closed her eyes, held the sheet tightly, and felt something new emerge inside her. It was not sadness. It was not shock. It was strength. Strength of those who finally understand the size of the enemy. Strength of those who know that, from then on, the game changes. Because the next step was no longer to try to understand the plan. It was to find out the full truth. The truth that she didn't have access to yet, but that was about to reveal itself in the next chapter, when all the pieces would finally fall into place. When she held that sheet with the date underlined and the expression, ideal day, written by his own hand, it felt as if the world had stopped for a few seconds. There was no more room for doubts, emotional justifications, or attempts to soften reality. The narration explained that there is a moment when the truth ceases to be suspicion and becomes evidence, and this transition is always brutal. She sat at the table with all the documents organized in front of her. The email with the confirmation of the transfer, the financial spreadsheets, the notes in the black folder, the agenda with scheduled appointments, the history of research on divorce and assets. Seen in isolation, each item could seem like a coincidence. But, together, they formed a clear, cruel, and millimetrically prepared drawing. She took a deep breath and, for the first time, allowed herself to say in a low voice a phrase that she had avoided until then. He planned everything. Not as an outburst, as a finding. That was no longer a presentiment. It was a sentence. She then picked up her cell phone and mentally reread his every behavior in light of this new truth. The coldness in recent months, the repeated excuses, the delays, the impromptu meetings, the exaggerated interest in the inheritance, the divorce request precisely on the day of the release of the documents. Nothing was accidental. Everything was aligned with the ultimate goal, to try to guarantee access to the money that her mother had left as a symbol of love and protection. The narration said that some people don't love you. They love what you stand for, what you carry, what you can offer. And, in his mind, she was no longer a wife, partner. It was a route to access a heritage site. She began to look at the papers as if she were putting together a criminal timeline, and the more she put the pieces together, the clearer it became that he didn't just want to separate. He wanted to separate at the exact time the law could favor him. Cold. Technician. Calculating. As someone who sees marriage not as a story, but as a contract to be broken at the most convenient point. When he leafed through one of the folders, he found a copy of a draft of a previous divorce agreement, with highlighted items and notes in the margin. Some excerpts were circulated, especially those that spoke of the division of assets acquired during the marriage, the possibility of claiming part of the amounts received during the union, and clauses on separation time. The narration, with a firm tone, explained that those who plan the end do not fear the emotional impact. They only fear losing advantage. He wrote short notes next to certain paragraphs, such as check deadlines, confirm with name, ensure before full transfer. When she read these words, she felt as if each letter was a slow stab. There was no consideration there about what she would feel, about what Christmas would become, about the meaning of inheritance. There was only strategy, as if she were a piece on a board, a piece manipulated to the last. Movement. The full truth began to emerge when she remembered something that, until then, had seemed irrelevant. Once, weeks earlier, he had come home angry, talking about a friend who was going through a messy divorce, in which he lost money for nothing. At the time, she just listened and went on with life. Now, in the light of the investigation, that conversation took on new meaning. The narration explained that, many times, those who are designing something test the narrative beforehand, rehearse the speech in parallel scenarios, try to measure the other person's reaction. And that friend may not even exist. Or, if it existed, it served as a case study. He wanted to understand where his friend went wrong so as not to repeat the same steps. In other words, he was already studying the best way to get out of the relationship with as much advantage as possible. Perhaps she had even learned from someone, or from the very consultant she had discovered. The truth, there, became greater than a punctual error, showed a standard of character. It wasn't a burst of emotion. It was a profile, a way of being, a type of person. It was then that she decided to connect all the dots with the help of someone who could see beyond the pain, a trusted lawyer, recommended by a relative. They arranged a discreet conversation in a small office in the center of the city, away from prying eyes. She took all the documents, all the folders, every printed note, and even photos of the board with dates that she had assembled at home. The narration described the moment when someone takes their pain to a cold office table as one of the most courageous acts that exist, because there you stop seeing only the emotional side and start facing the legal reality, raw. The lawyer listened to everything in silence, leafed through the papers, asked specific questions, and, little by little, his expression changed. It was no longer a surprise. It was technical confirmation. He explained that there was a clear pattern: use of privileged information, preparation of a separation strategy at the most favorable time for equity discussion, prior consultations with a financial expert, and an attempt to create a scenario in which she would be emotionally destabilized precisely in the crucial period of signing any document. In short, the husband had a plan to try to control not only the money, but her mental state during the process. The hardest part was hearing, from the mouth of a professional, that divorce request on the exact day of inheritance had nothing symbolic or emotional. It was tactical. He wanted to catch you at the most vulnerable moment, the lawyer explained, calmly. The narration added that the most dangerous evil is not the one that explodes. It is the one that calculates the moment to attack. He counted on her shock, on the confusion, on the guilt that many women automatically carry when a marriage ends, even if it's not their responsibility. He counted on the fact that she would be dealing with grief, inheritance papers, old and recent pains at the same time. The idea was simple. The more emotionally overloaded, the less attention she would pay to the legal details. And so he could sign something that favored his plan. From that point on, the truth wasn't just revealed, it was documented. He wasn't just trying to be unfair. He was trying to take advantage of her vulnerability. That was the center of everything. But the revelation that sealed the plan once and for all came when the lawyer, analyzing the dates, cross-referenced information with the legal system itself and realized that certain transactions in the husband's name had already been initiated before the divorce request. Consultations on the possibility of changing the property regime, attempts to transfer small amounts to accounts that were not directly in his name, small simulations of investments in third parties. It was as if he was preparing to hide his own trail as he reached out toward her inheritance. The narration pointed out that, at that moment, any remnant of naivety that still existed in her heart was uprooted. He was not just a man in crisis. He was someone willing to manipulate, hide, distort facts, and use the affection of years as a tool to achieve his own benefit. The mask fell, not with noise, but with the cruel weight of absolute disappointment. Sitting in that chair in the office, listening to everything the lawyer explained in technical terms, she felt a mixture of pain, disgust, and clarity. It hurt to understand who he really was. It hurt to realize that the man who once held her hand on altars, oaths, and promises, now held documents to try to get from her what represented her mother's last gesture of love. It hurt too much. But along with the pain, something powerful was born. The narration said that the truth, when it finally reveals itself completely, gives the heart a choice: to break for good or rebuild stronger. And as shattered as she was, she felt a decision brewing inside. She wouldn't be the weak target of his plan. He would not be the helpless victim of his own history. It would not be the person who signs crying while the other smiles inside. The truth had been handed to her as a weapon, not as a weight. And she was going to use it. That day, he returned home different. Christmas continued to decorate the city, but the meaning of the lights had changed. They were no longer just ornaments. They were reminders that, even in the midst of darkness, there is always some glimmer of clarity that insists on appearing. The narration explained that, from that point on, the relationship between the two changed without him knowing it. He still believed that he commanded the board. She, in silence, now saw the whole game. She watched her husband come into the house, act normally, speak half-rehearsed sentences about how difficult things were, and felt almost as if she were watching a bad play. I knew the script. I knew the outcome he wanted. He knew the strategy. But what he didn't know was that she had already read the entire script in advance. And that changed everything. Because the next act would no longer be him writing alone. It would be her rewriting her own role in the story. And it is precisely here that the narrative curve changes completely. Now that she knows about the plan in all its details, the consultant, the documents, the dates, the intentions, the attempts at legal favoritism, the question is no longer, what is he doing to me? And becomes, what am I going to do with what he tried to do to me? The narrative concludes this chapter by saying that the truth, when it appears whole, does not serve only to explain the past. It serves to direct the future. She was no longer in doubt. I was no longer lost. He was no longer wondering if he was exaggerating. Knew. He had proof. He had guidance. And most of all, there was something he deeply underestimated: courage. From that point on, the next step would be inevitable: the final showdown. Because, after the mask falls, the time comes to look into the eyes of the traitor and show that he is no longer in front of the same woman he thought he could manipulate. The moment of confrontation did not come as a sudden explosion. It arrived like an inevitable tide, slow, silent, but so strong that it would sweep away everything in its path. She spent the whole night awake, sitting at the living room table, with the documents scattered before her as silent witnesses to the most calculated betrayal she had ever faced. The narration explained that the real confrontation doesn't begin when two people finally face each other. It begins when one of them understands the whole truth and decides not to run away anymore. And that's exactly what formed inside her. Not anger, but decision. Not out of control, but firmness. When she heard the door open in the morning and the sound of keys falling on the sideboard, she felt a strange calm spread through her body. It was as if, for the first time in months, he was completely in control of his own story. He entered the room with his usual neutral expression, believing that she was still lost, vulnerable, emotionally broken, believing that he still had the advantage. But when he saw her sitting there, her posture steady and her gaze fixed, he hesitated for a second, just a second, but enough to show that he was not prepared for that version of her. The narration explained that manipulators know how to act on fragility, but they do not know how to deal with clarity. Clarity disarms. Clarity exposes it. Clarity reveals. She didn't say good morning, didn't offer coffee, didn't ask soft questions. He just pointed to the chair in front of him. He smiled, that rehearsed smile he wore as a mask, and asked if she was better. But she didn't answer. He just pushed the first document in his direction, the printed email, and he observed the reaction. He tried to disguise it, tried to look confused, tried to act as if he didn't understand what it was. But her silence was a wall he couldn't get through. "Why did you have that?" she asked with a calmness that left him disconcerted. "Why did you receive this information before me? Why does this name appear in everything?" The narration explained that there are questions that do not ask for answers. They require confession. And her questions were exactly like that. He took a deep breath, tried to create improvised justifications, tried to manipulate the dialogue as he always did. He said that maybe it was a mistake, that maybe someone had sent it to him by mistake, that maybe she was misinterpreting. All sentences began with maybe, the favorite word of those who try to escape the truth. But there, in that evidence-laden environment, maybe was just the admission disguised as guilt. She then placed the black folder on the table. His sleeve trembled slightly. He tried to grab the briefcase, but she pulled it back, keeping her hand steady. He said that he had seen everything, that he knew about the meetings, the planned transfers, the legal consultations before the divorce, the dates aligned with the inheritance, the handwritten notes with the expression "ideal day." And when he said, "I know what you've done," he finally lost his pose. The narration explained that when the mask falls, it never falls slowly. It falls in one piece, leaving everything exposed. And he there, without a mask, was small. Not the man she married, not the companion with whom he built memories, but someone cold, someone who underestimated her intelligence, someone who thought pain was synonymous with blindness. And now he was the one who was blind, because he didn't expect her to have found out everything. He tried to recover and, in a desperate act, tried to reverse the situation. He said that she was being exaggerated, that she was seeing evil where there was none, that the inheritance was messing with her head. But she was not shaken. Instead, she opened the final envelope, the legal report that her lawyer prepared with all the cross-checks of dates, laws, and evidence. He put it on the table and said, "If you keep lying, this is going to court, and I guarantee you'll lose more than you thought you'd gain." The narration said that true strength is not in screaming, but in being able to face someone who destroyed you and still speak firmly enough to dismantle the castle of manipulations. And at that moment, she was no longer the betrayed woman. It was the woman who discovered the plan, organized the evidence, and chose the exact moment to disarm it. Her intelligence was now her main weapon. Cornered, he tried to change the narrative. He said he still loved her, that he was confused, that he was pressured by wrong advice, that he got lost along the way. He tried to turn the plan into a recent regret. He tried to use the same soft tone that always worked to calm her down. But it didn't work this time. She interrupted him with just one sentence. "If you loved me, you wouldn't have planned for my pain." It was a phrase that cut through the air of the room like a silent blade. The narration explained that there are truths so perfect that they do not need compliments. They end the dialogue on their own. He was left without an answer. He looked at the table, at the papers, at her. He was looking for a way out that didn't exist. The trap he had built for months had finally closed in, but on him. And she just watched, with the serenity of someone who finally sees the enemy without distortions. The conversation took an even more revealing turn when he gave up denying and began to justify. He said that the consultant, his name unknown, had actually advised him on how to protect yourself financially. He admitted that he knew about the inheritance before she knew it. He admitted that this did influence the decision. He admitted that the day of the divorce was calculated. He admitted, while trying to soften it, that he wanted to be in a position of advantage if she was emotionally upset. The narration said that when the truth begins to come out, it comes out in one piece, even when the person tries to control it. And there, in that involuntary confessional, he exposed everything. Everything he tried to hide for months. Everything she discovered little by little, like loose threads of rotten fabric. He spoke. She listened. And while he listened, he did not cry. He didn't tremble. He did not hesitate. Because at that moment, the pain had already turned into conviction. When he finally finished, not because she wanted to, but because she had nothing else to invent, she got up slowly, collected the documents, and said that, from that moment on, any communication between them would only happen via a lawyer. No discussions. No manipulations. No attempts to solve it at home. She had ended not just a conversation there. She had ended his authority over her life. The narration said that the most powerful emotional closure is not the one that ends with screams, but the one that ends with limits. Limits that do not open gaps for return, for confusion, for false reconciliations. He sat there in astonishment, realizing that the woman he tried to dismantle was now the one who had the power. And that power didn't come from revenge. It came from truth, clarity, and the fact that she finally saw who he really was. The scene ended with him asking, in a thin voice, if there was a chance of going back. And she replied, with a tranquility she wouldn't recognize in herself months before, "You destroyed this chance when you decided to betray me before you even warned me." The narration explained that there are sentences that close entire cycles, and that one closed not only the chapter, it closed the book of naivety that it carried. And as he stood there, diminished, trying to figure out how it all turned against him, she walked into the hallway and stopped, before going up the stairs. He looked back one last time and thought, he didn't expect me to find out. But I found out. And in the next step, I'm going to free myself completely. And with this thought, the movement that would lead to the definitive turning point began when he climbed the stairs after the confrontation. He didn't feel the weight of those fleeing. He felt the relief of those who finally put the truth cards on the table. Each step felt symbolic, as if she were leaving behind not only the man who betrayed her, but also the version of herself who believed that love was synonymous with endurance to the end. The narration explained that there are times in life when strength is not in holding on, it is in letting go. And that night, she let go. She let go of guilt, let go of emotional blindness, let go of the hope of fixing what had already been destroyed long before she realized it. When she entered the room, she saw the reflection of herself in the mirror, and for the first time in a long time, she did not see a lost woman. He saw a woman awake. He saw a woman who knew exactly what she needed to do. The silence of the room was not empty. It was freedom beginning to form. She spent hours there, sitting on the bed, with the soft lights reflecting off the wall, remembering who she was before this relationship turned into a field of manipulations and hidden calculations. The narration said that the rescue of identity is always the first step of liberation. And she began to rescue small fragments of her own soul, remembering when she had dreams, projects, lightness, spontaneous laughter. She realized how she had molded herself to his behavior, how she had dimmed her own light to try to keep the relationship alive. But now, the revelation of his plan worked as the definitive break of the chains that had kept her limited. Curiously, he felt no hatred. He felt clarity. I felt a kind of courage that doesn't scream, but pulsates. A quiet courage which says, "You'll never hurt me like that again." This phrase wasn't directed at him. It was directed at the old version of her, who accepted little while giving much. The next morning, she woke up different. The body felt lighter, as if it had slept for the first time in months, even though the sleep had been short. The narration explained that when the soul decides to change, the body follows. She got up, brewed a strong coffee, and sat down at the table with her laptop open. Not to watch, not to distrust, not to poke around, but to act. He opened emails, talked to his lawyer, made adjustments to the documents, made practical decisions. He protected the inheritance. She protected what was hers by right and for her mother's love. He protected his own history. Then, he began to organize accounts, review contracts, change passwords, make small changes that represented great symbols of autonomy. It wasn't about money. It was about reclaiming back control of one's life. And each click represented a step towards emotional independence. During the day, he tried to talk to her a few times, using the old soft tone, trying to reverse, trying to reconstruct a narrative where he didn't seem so guilty. But she did not give in. He did not answer. He did not explain. He did not get into emotional discussions. The narration said that ignoring manipulation is not indifference, it is protection. And as he tried to create small paths back, she built emotional walls that he couldn't cross. One of the biggest internal turning points came when she finally understood that trusting is not about continuing to believe in someone who lies. To trust is to believe in one's own perception. And her perception was more vivid than ever. He no longer needed excuses, justifications, rehearsed phrases. He only needed his own conscience. And this awareness now guided everything. Over the next few days, she began to pick up on small habits that she had abandoned because of the emotional exhaustion of marriage. Walks in the neighborhood, visits to the local coffee shop, conversations with a neighbor who always invited her to come along and whom she never accepted because of her husband's excuses. She even started listening to songs that he said he didn't like. And in doing so, she realized how much she had shaped her own routine around his discomfort. The narration explained that emotional freedom sometimes begins with small rebellions. And every step, no matter how small, was a declaration of rebirth. She allowed herself to smile again, not a wide smile, but a discreet smile, one of those who announce that the worst is over and that now the path is forward. A smile that is born when the soul understands that it deserves more. A deeply symbolic moment came when, while tidying up an old drawer, she found a photo of her with her mother, in a snow-covered park, the two of them laughing nonchalantly. The image made his eyes fill with emotion, but not with pain, with strength. The narration said that true love, even when it comes from people who have already departed, is a compass. And that photo reminded us that his mother's inheritance was not just financial assets. It was courage. It was clarity. It was dignity. It was the right not to accept less than what you deserve. And when she looked at that photo, she understood that her mother would never have left that gift to be used against her. So, he kept the photo in his bag, as a symbol of protection. And with that, she closed another emotional door that her husband had tried to manipulate. From that point on, his life began to reorganize itself as a house undergoing a major internal renovation. There was still wreckage. There were still marks. There were still subtle pains. But everything was rearranging itself toward growth, not collapse. The narration explained that the turning point in one's life does not happen when the enemy is defeated, but when the person decides not to return to the state they were in before. And she decided. She decided to block emotionally, legally, and energetically any return of him to the space he occupied before. She decided to go through the divorce process firmly. He decided to prioritize himself. And each decision was a solid brick built on the foundation of the revelation she had. It was as if he was finally breathing fresh air after months of living in a closed, stuffy house. And when she finally sat down in the living room again, days after the confrontation, she realized that the Christmas atmosphere no longer seemed so heavy. The light seemed more vivid, not because everything was resolved, but because she herself had changed. The narration explained that internal change is the greatest embellishment that life can have. She looked up at the pine tree, and for the first time since the storm began, she felt something like quiet relief, a harbinger of peace. The pain still existed, of course. The betrayal did not disappear. But the pain now went hand in hand with a new force, a force that said, "You survived the worst. Now it's time to live the best." And with that thought, she got up, took a deep breath, and prepared to face the last chapter of this journey. The Christmas that would change her life forever. Christmas that year arrived in a different way, without the rush and noise of other years, but also without the weight she feared to carry. It was as if the universe, after so many revelations and pains, had decided to give him a silent pause, a necessary interval to reorganize everything that had been broken. The streets were illuminated, the houses decorated, and the snow fell so lightly that it seemed like an invitation to reflection. She went for a walk in the morning, wrapped in a warm coat, feeling the cold air hit her face as a reminder that she was still alive, that she still had a future. The narration explained that true rebirth rarely happens at noisy parties. It happens in silence. In the silence of a cold morning, when you finally understand that you don't have to carry anything else that destroyed your peace. And on that walk, something inside her lined up, a kind of calm that was no longer afraid of the past. When he returned home, he turned on all the Christmas lights as he had as a child, not to impress anyone, not to maintain external traditions, but to warm the internal space where so many difficult memories had accumulated. The glow of the lights reflected off the walls as if they were erasing the shadows of the last few weeks. The narration said that the soul also has its own embellishments, and they shine when the person finally decides to move on. She sat down near the tree, holding a mug of hot chocolate, and took a deep breath. For the first time since it all began, she didn't feel tightness in her chest. He felt no fear of the future. He did not feel anger at the past. He only felt presence. It was a moment so simple, yet so powerful, that it seemed miraculous. It was the kind of peace that doesn't come because things are perfect. It comes because you're finally whole. Throughout the day, small things happened that rekindled his faith in life. She received an affectionate message from a friend she hadn't seen in years, inviting her to dinner. She received a call from her sister, who said she missed her and wanted to spend a few days with her. He even received a card left at the door by an elderly neighbor who always admired his kindness, wishing a Christmas full of internal lights. The narration explained that the world always gives back what you radiate, and she was finally radiating hope. Not naive hope, but mature hope, the one that is born after surviving the worst and realizing that there is still life on the other side of the chaos. Each gesture felt like a silent embrace from life itself, saying, "You are not alone. You never were." In the afternoon, she decided to prepare a simple dinner, something symbolic only for herself. He cooked calmly, listening to classic Christmas songs and allowing himself to smile as he remembered good times that didn't involve pain. The voiceover said that cooking for yourself is an act of self-love, especially when you've spent so much time taking care of someone who didn't take care of you. When he set the table, he placed a candle next to the plate, not as a way to romanticize loneliness, but as a way to celebrate the beginning of a new phase. And when she sat down to eat, she did something she hadn't done in years. She thanked herself. "He thanked me for the strength, the courage, the clarity, the resistance." He was grateful that he hadn't broken himself, even when everything around him seemed to collapse. After dinner, she went to the box where she kept her mother's memories and took out a small antique ornament, a simple glass ornament with a golden glow. It was fragile, delicate, easy to break, but it had survived all the years, all the house moves, all the accidental falls. The narration explained that this ornament was the perfect representation of her, something that seemed fragile, but that endured more than many would imagine. She hung the ornament high up in the tree, in a place where the light hit it in a special way, and closed her eyes. She felt that her mother was there, not as a painful memory, but as a welcoming presence. As if to say, in silence, "You did the right thing. I'm proud." That ornament shone differently that night, as if it carried a piece of the soul of both. At dusk, she sat in the armchair by the window and watched the neighborhood children playing in the snow. She felt no sadness for being alone. He felt freedom. The narration said that loneliness is not being without someone. Loneliness is being with someone who destroys your peace. And now, without him there, without lies, without manipulation, without tension, the house seemed to breathe again. The silence that was once heavy was now comfortable. She even allowed herself to think about the future, not in a hurry, but with curiosity. She wondered what the next few months would be like, the next discoveries, the next versions of herself. And she realized that she was ready. Ready to start over. Ready to rebuild. Ready to live a life that was hers, entirely. Before going to sleep, he wrote in a small notebook a phrase that spontaneously popped into his mind. "The most valuable inheritance I received was not money, it was the chance to be reborn." And as she wrote this, she understood that she had indeed been blessed in a painful but profound way. The narration explained that some blessings come packed with losses, because only then do we have the courage to change what we tolerated out of fear. She closed the notebook, put it next to the bed, and turned off the lights, leaving only the soft glow of the tree reflecting on the wall. It was a silent reminder that some lights stay on even when everything seems dark. Interior lights. Lights that no one else can turn off. And as he lay down, he felt that this Christmas was not just a date on the calendar. It was a milestone, a divider, the exact point at which she stopped being a spectator of her own life and became an author. The narration ended the chapter by explaining that every painful story needs a moment of healing to complete, and that was hers. The Christmas that changed everything. The Christmas that broke her life in half and, at the same time, rebuilt it. The Christmas that closed doors, opened others, and illuminated paths that she would never have seen if she had not gone through the darkness. And it was with this feeling of silent rebirth that she fell asleep, ready to tell, one day, this whole story, from the beginning. In the end, every story that seems destined to break someone ends up revealing a strength that the person himself did not yet know he had. And that's exactly what happened here. When everything fell apart, when the truth came out, when love stopped being love and became a strategy, she chose something that many cannot choose, to be reborn. Because what really changes a life is not what they take away from you, but what you decide to rebuild later. And the question that remains is simple, but powerful. How many things do you still accept in your life that should have already ended? How many situations do you call love, when in fact they are emotional prisons in disguise? How many truths do you ignore because you fear what will happen if you finally look at them? This woman's story is not just hers. She is a mirror, a warning, an invitation. And if today you realize that you need to free yourself from something, from someone, from a belief, from a cycle, from a lie, know that the first step is never the most difficult. The hardest thing is to admit that you deserve better. After that, everything falls into place. Now I want you to tell me, which part of this story moved you the most? What made you think? What would you have done differently? Leave it in the comments. Your answer could be the strength someone else needs. And before you leave, make a simple choice that can change your relationship with your own growth. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and keep following stories that transform, strengthen, and open your eyes, because, in the end, no one is reborn alone. And you deserve to walk accompanied by stories that lift you up, never stories that bring you down.